Before I begin, I just want to apologize. I feel like I sound a little froggy. I've got some allergies, so I've got a bit of a sore throat, so I apologize if I sound worse than normal. I just wanted to take a moment and go over some common things that I saw in your first essays. I hope to be able to do this for each of your essays, but I definitely wanted to do it for this first one. It kind of gets everybody together, sees the things that others are doing so that you know you're not the only one, but so that I can address it as a whole instead of just doing it on your papers. Also, it will help you, maybe there's an error on here that you didn't do for the first essay, but you might have done in the second. I'm trying to head that off too. So the first major thing I want to address is following the prompt. That is, even though it's not on that response sheet that I give you, if you don't follow the prompt, your paper won't pass when I grade the final draft of it. So you have to make sure that you follow the prompt and do exactly what it asked. So for essay number 1, you were asked to discuss a decision you made, one particular specific decision and its implications on you. And a number of you didn't do that. So I don't mean to startle you when I tell you that your paper's not going to pass if you don't fix that, but that's the whole point of the prompt. It's the assignment. It would be like you doing a completely different grammar activity than what I assigned. So you have to do the assignment based on what is outlined in the prompt, or it's not going to pass. It's just as important as your length. So make sure when you revise that your paper meets every single detail that I give in the prompt. Most of the other details are on the response sheet, and in the future I can add it for clarification, but you've got to follow the assignment. That should be kind of a no-brainer, and I was kind of surprised how few people did that. Some of you, most of you actually skirted around what I was asking you to do, but you didn't do it. So for example, maybe you talked about a decision to go back to school, but you only mention it at the very end and it's not the focus of your paper. Well, you didn't do what I asked. I asked you to define that decision, not to briefly mention it as you're concluding your entire essay that is nothing but background information leading up to that that decision. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of your decision by any means, or not your decision, the background information. The background information is extremely important because for most of you in the topics that you chose, it's the background that leads you to that. However, it's just support. So one paragraph of background is all that you really need. Otherwise, it just kills your focus, which kills your whole paper. So you're undercutting yourself by focusing on the background that leads up to the decision. So I hope that makes sense. I tried to give really good detail on this draft since it's the first one and you're kind of getting the feel for how I grade and what I'm looking for. So it's fine. Just remember that you have to follow the prompt. That's a pretty big requirement of the essay and should kind of go without saying, but here I am saying it. Make sure you do that. So in the future, when I say you need to write about this, make sure your paper does that. All right, some quick grammar helps. I've been working on, future assignments for you in this class, so I kind of get lost as to what we've covered and stuff. So I'm going to cover this again, like proper nouns. I know that you covered last week, but the other two, I'm not exactly sure how much we've gotten into them in the course content yet. I know it's there. I couldn't tell you what week it's in because it's all a big jumble in my poor rotting brain. So introductory clauses. Yeah, I should have written down an example, but an introductory clause would say, in the beginning, there was man. Okay, so in the beginning is an introductory clause. It needs to be set off with a comma. So for a lot of you, I just started highlighting those clauses, and then in my comments off to the right, I said introductory clause. You then need to know that, oh, I need to put a comma after that. So you always need that, even if it's one word. So if you said later, I went to the movie, later needs a comma after it. It's an introductory clause, even though it's one word. It's just a separate element of your sentence that separates it. Okay, does that make sense? I know we'll get to them, but we may not have gotten there yet. I think that's actually more of a complex sentence type thing, which won't come up for a couple of weeks. So I'm giving you a heads up now. When you have introductory clauses, send them off with a comma. And like I say, for those of you who are having that consistent issue, I pointed them out to you, so you should be able to catch them. We've talked about independent clauses and dependent clauses. This is the kind of dependent clause that happens at the beginning of your sentence. For example, comma, that's an introductory clause. All right, proper nouns. We covered proper nouns last week. And this is a problem I see in even higher levels of composition. So it's one of those things that, I don't know, students just do it. You don't need to capitalize random words. Unless it's a proper noun, it doesn't need to be capitalized. High school is not a proper noun. High school diploma is not a proper noun. They're just nouns. Now, if you said Pendleton High School, that is a proper noun, and so each word needs to be capitalized. But if you're just saying, I went to high school is not a proper noun. Okay, so you don't need to capitalize it. So I pointed stuff out like that as well. Just be really careful with it. I think sometimes students think like an idea, like love is a thing, a big thing, an important thing, and they capitalize it, and it's not grammatical. You don't need to. So lay off with the capitalization. You just don't need it. Okay, so don't over capitalize things. And a huge comma problem. It's a super easy fix. You just, again, have to be aware of it, but you probably in the parts of speech chapter last week, it mentioned that there needs to be a comma with your conjunctions. If not, you'll get it more when you learn about compound sentences. But every time you have a conjunction that is separating two independent clauses, you know what an independent clause is now. When you have a conjunction separating those two independent clauses, you have to have a comma. That's an extremely common error. But if you can improve on that, that would be great, because I'm seeing them all over the place. So just remember, if you put in a conjunction, stop and think, do I need a comma here? It's all a matter of thinking. If you are typing too fast to think about what you're doing, slow down. Go word by word if you have to. It's worth it in the end. So yeah, just take your time with it. For the most part, I was extremely impressed with the MLA. I don't know how much of you have had to deal with it in the past, but I teach for another school, and I teach 101 there. So it's the equivalent of, 121 at Blue Mountain. And you've got better MLA on your first essay than they do. So I was extremely impressed. So if you just went off of the directions I gave, you did an awesome job for the most part. Some of you, not so much. So if I commented on your MLA, all you have to do, it's not something you're going to find in your book. I don't think it talks about it at all. You are strictly relying on the material I give online. And anything I post online is part of the course content, and I do expect you to watch the videos and, listen to me drone on about horrible things like MLA. But that I'm expecting you to do that, and you do need to do that. So if you have errors in your MLA that I pointed out and you don't know how to fix them, go back to that video. I do understand that different versions of Word can be a little more complicated. I have to go with the most updated software, which is what I have. And if you don't have that, you're going to have to adapt your work to meet that standard of the more current technology. Okay, but again, for the most part, I was extremely impressed with your MLA, so very good job there. Another big problem that I saw was having one main idea and how that affects your focus. I've talked about focus last week in the academic standards that I'm looking for in this class. You only need to write about one thing in your paper. You're writing a 2-page paper. It may feel like a lot to you, but really, it's tiny. So when I give you a prompt that says, discuss one decision you made, that's all you should be discussing. Just one thing, one main focus. And then you need to take that main idea and turn it into a thesis statement and put it in your introduction. I know we haven't gotten into a lot of depth about focus and thesis statements and things like that, but I have covered it last week. And if you're confused as to what these things are, you need to go back and review them. There's nothing wrong with outside research too. So a thesis statement belongs in your introduction, and it's basically a one-sentence statement about what you're going to talk about what your point is. So with some of your narratives, I know it sounds mean, and I certainly don't mean it that way, but I'll ask, what's the point of this? And you need to know what the point is. If you don't know the point, you're missing your main idea, you're missing your focus, and you're missing a thesis statement. That's why those are so critical. So make sure you work on those in your revision and in every paper to come. You have to have these things. If you don't set up your main idea and present it in a thesis statement, the rest of your paper is unfocused, and it's extremely hard for me to even grade because there's nothing to it. You can have a beautifully written sentences, but if that focus is off, your whole paper doesn't work. Okay? I know, sounds harsh, but it's true. It's really, really important stuff. I really harp on transitions. That's another element, I believe, in the academic writing document that I go over in the video that I make. And that's just certain words and phrases that move your paragraphs from one to the next, and from one sentence to the next. And I do have a really good worksheet on what those kind of phrases and words are. So we will get to that at some point. I will post it at some point when I feel it's the most appropriate for the content, but you can still be worried. It's things like, for example, therefore, and then, things like don't use and then. Don't start your sentence with a conjunction. But it's just little things like that. They're so simple. And once I give you the sheet, you'll probably go, oh, duh, that's what a transition is. So if it's confusing to you, again, do some outside research if you need to, if you're really confused as to what I'm saying. And between sentences, or between sentences, it can be as simple as a word or a couple words. When it comes to your paragraphs, it's going to be a bit longer. So say in one paragraph you're talking about something, and then you're moving on from that, you can simply reference that idea really quickly and say, but then, and then move on to your next point. That's where your topic sentences come in. Okay, and we'll work on those too. So work on your transitions. Contractions, I've already told you, please don't use them in your writing. It's too informal. Spell out the words and say it. Instead of saying can't, say cannot, won't, will not, things like that. A lot of you had pretty weak conclusions, and I know we're going to work on more later. I know this is just your first paper, but you've got to start practicing and improving now. You can't just wait till the end of the quarter to do that. But remember that your conclusion's how you end your paper. If you introduce new information, you just wasted your paper, because then it makes me go, what, huh? Oh, you're just going to leave me hanging? So don't introduce new information. Wrap up what it was that you said, and stay focused. Again, if you don't have a thesis statement and a main idea controlling the rest of your paper, how do you know how to conclude? And that's probably why it's so hard. Make your conclusion strong. The last thing I want to talk about is my commentary. From now on, I'm not going to give you as much help. It's not that I'm not going to give you as much help. I'm not going to give you as much detail in your future drafts. I spent probably about 45 minutes per paper. If you do the math, I have spent hours looking over your paper. So I'm willing to do it on the first one. From now on, I'm mostly just going to highlight stuff, and it's up to you to find the errors. So it's not exhaustive. You still have more work to do beyond what I just point out. But hopefully it's helpful. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. And I look forward to seeing your revision. So if you need anything, just let me know.